Lesson 47, how do you endure pain? Jesus is about to show us a number of principles through his trial before Pontius Pilate, the governor of Judea, or the more technical term is procurator of Judea. He was working for the Roman government and working his way up the ladder of the Roman government. His ultimate goal was to be a senator. But to be a senator, you had to first be a governor or procurator. And Israel, though it's a backwater, could be a stepping stone to a more advanced career. His sponsor, or his political mentor, was a guy by the name of Sejanus. Both him and Pilate were known anti-Semites. But you got to do what you got to do. He can be a ruler of Israel for a few years and then move up the ladder to senator. Problem. The emperor at the time was Tiberius, a horrible human being and a bad ruler. Something had to be done. He wasn't even living in Rome. He was on an island, and it was really in a cave of, I hate to say this, but it was a horrible sex den of every just inconceivable vile act that could take place. He was there doing that. So Janus said, somebody's got to lead the country. He tried to take over the throne. He got caught and killed in AD 31. Now, if I'm correct that Jesus' crucifixion was AD 33, it could have been 30, but if it was 33, that would explain a lot of Pilate's response to the Jews. Remember, he did not want to kill Jesus. He saw him as an innocent man. And though he is an anti-Semite, he also is a law and order ruler, takes pride in that. 10 different times he tried to release Jesus through this one trial. He failed because the Jews threatened to expose him to the emperor. Ultimately, they said, if you don't give us what we want, we will tell Tiberius that you are no friend of Caesar's. And he capitulated, washed his hands of Jesus, and crucified him. Now, a little more of the backstory will help you understand the real tension between the Jews and Pilate. When he came into office, he wanted to honor Tiberius, suck up to the boss's boss. So he had these placards made of the image of Tiberius, and he put them in the temple of God. He thought it was honoring his emperor. The Jews thought it was blasphemy. And in no uncertain terms, they told him so. Marched right to his palace in Caesarea. He knew they were coming. He warned the guards, when I give you the signal, you come out with swords drawn. They did. But Pilate never could have guessed how they were going to respond. The Jews literally laid down on the ground and exposed their necks as if to say, we would rather be dead than be blasphemers like you. So the tension was laid. Fast forward a few years, Pilate wants to build an aqueduct. It was for the people, but also for his own reputation. He doesn't have the money, so he confiscates it from the temple treasury. Other governors of other regions were allowed to do that. But Pilate underestimated the vociferous complaints of the Jews and the sacredness that they held the temple treasury in. They lost that round. So one for the Jewish leaders, one for Pilate. Jesus, he's going to be the tiebreaker. So the Jews come with 3 charges against him. One was that he refused to pay taxes, which was ridiculous because he had just said 3 days earlier, this coin has Caesar's image on it, so give it back to Caesar. It's his. So that's a bogus charge. Second charge has some merit, that he caused riots, kind of true, except that the Pharisees are the ones that really started it every time. So that's a dangerous charge to level at Jesus because it can boomerang right back at you. Third charge, and this is the only charge that Pilate actually investigated, is that Jesus claimed to be king. That would have been capital punishment because nobody could claim to be king but the emperor. So that's the question that Pilate opens the interrogation with. Are you a king? And according to Matthew and Mark, actually Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it simply says, you said so. Sounds kind of quippish, like punchy even. John gives us a little more insight. John 18, verse 34. Do you say this on your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? Jesus is asking, are using your definition of king, because that would be emperor, and no. But if you're asking about a Jewish definition, that would be Messiah, and, well, yes. So Jesus is not evading the question. He's trying to clarify a good question with a decent answer. Matthew 27:13. Here's Pilate's response. Do you not hear how many things they testify against you? But he gave him no answer, not even a single charge. So the governor was greatly amazed. And not just amazed. Now, a point of fact, this is a good strategy for Jesus. If someone accuses you of something they cannot prove, do not open your mouth to give them ammunition. But still, Pilate wants to release Jesus, and it's not happening with the chief priests, the Pharisees, the scribes, accusing him of all of these outrageous charges. So Pilate, he tries a ploy. Apparently he's done it before, although we have no historical record of this happening. Pilate claims in the biblical text that he has given freedom to captives before as a gift to the Jews on Passover, the sacred holiday and all. So he chooses the worst of his prisoners, a guy named Barabbas. He was a rebel. These particular rebels, probably a precursor to the Zealots, they would rob from the Jewish people who were friendly to the Romans. Like, if you're going to be friendly to the Romans, we're going to take your money and we're going to give it to the rebellion to defeat the Romans. They were also murderers. They had these knives that they would conceal under their cloaks and go in a crowd and stab someone secretly. And then they would say, he's been stabbed, he's been stabbed. And when everyone is looking at the victim, they quietly slip away. They were rough characters. And so Pilate thinks for sure, Jesus guy's been healing people, Barabbas guy's been killing people, let me give him a choice, see what they say. It was not even close. The crowd began to chant, crucify him, crucify him. And Pilate knew, this is insightful, for he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream. Well, to us, dreams are just subconscious thoughts. To them, they were communiques of the gods. Pilate is getting nervous now because he not only realizes that Jesus is righteous, but he might believe that God is on his side, and he does not want to be on the wrong side of that ledger. So Pilate offers Barabbas, they clamor for crucifixion, and he asks, again, attempting 10 times to release Jesus. Pilate says, then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ? They all said, let him be crucified. And he said, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, let him be crucified. And when they threatened Pilate with his political career, if you don't give us what we want, we will tell Tiberius that you're disloyal. After Sejanus' execution, his could very well be next. So he does something actually quite Jewish. This wasn't a Roman practice, a Jewish practice. He washed his hands. And he said, I'm innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves. And all the people answered, his blood be on us and on our children. Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. It's a terrible story, but from it we can draw a number of lessons that might help you when you're going through a trial. When you are suffering, how do you endure through that? Well, number one, this is great advice. Don't talk too much. Silence is your friend. You don't need to defend yourself with words. Simply live with integrity. That will ultimately silence the opposition. And number two, suffering. You got to know what's worth suffering for. Because sometimes we fight battles that we shouldn't be fighting because of our stubbornness, because of our pride. Jesus knew when it was worth being silent, even if he had to suffer. Third, hope. Righteousness will always be vindicated. I've never seen an exception to that. It may take longer than you hope or want or like, but righteousness will always be vindicated, not just from God's justice, but from the world's perspective. They will see who was on the right side through their right behavior. Finally, love. The reason Jesus suffered was because of his great love. And if you're suffering because of love, even for your enemies, it takes the great burden away. It doesn't make it easy, but it takes the greatest burden away of bitterness and revenge and anger. You can suffer righteously, knowing that in the end, God will lift you up.